I was very close to my mom, and then she died.
Oh, wow. How old were you?
I was actually in my early 30s when she died.
Okay.
The shock of it was when she died, I had to look for my father to bury my mom. Because the culture where we come from, my husband had not got married to him yet, we were living together. He couldn't bury my mom.
No.
So I had to look for my father because she was still technically legally married to him according to our culture.
Yes.
It was cultural, not legally.
Yes.
Culture. So he had to come for the funeral, and then he said that later my husband, the person I was dating, cannot participate in the funeral because I was not legally married to him. So I had to put my mom's corpse and went to the mosque, got married, and give him the authority to come and bury my mom. That's how I got married. On the day of my mom's funeral.
It's when you got married?
I had to get married to give him the authority to bury my mom.
Wow. And how did you even find your dad?
Well, I knew where he was. Sierra Leone is small. It's not like Kenya.
Yeah.
We're 7 million. Even that, I think, is it's 7 million.
Yeah.
I think we're not up to 7 million. So we know each other. You go to Sierra Leone, you call my name. 2, 3 people, somebody will know me. We're very small.
Yeah.
You know, so we know, I know where he was. We just didn't have a relationship.
Yeah.
You know, but of course, when my mom died, we had to track him down, call him on the phone, and he had to come to the village.
Yes.
You know, so.
Yes.
And after the funeral, I knew something was wrong. Because I couldn't believe here was my father. My father, of course, loved me. I learned Arabic before I learned English. We were very close as a family. But because of his own values, religious values, which took us apart. So I had that kind of, I said, he's left us, he's abandoned us. We grew up under very, very difficult circumstances. We went to bed many times without food. And yet this is a man who had to dictate my life. So after my mom died, I went to the city and I went straight to UNDP and I said, luckily, the head of the UNDP at that time was a woman. And I said, I don't understand. And I went to see her to ask for advice. And then she smiled. She said, this is what we talk about women's rights. Because that was when she explained to me, we have, the Constitution recognizes cultural, religious, and traditional laws. So it depends which parts of the country you come, your whole life is structured around those laws. So, for example, I'm Muslim.
Right.
Inheritance, childbearing, whatever is according to the Islamic law. If I come from that tradition, the traditional leaders have a responsibility.
Yes.
You know. So I said, so what can I do? She said, if you can help me to get women together. She said, since I came, but it was a taboo. You know, like at some point in my country, you can't talk about FGM. Because there's certain things you can't touch. The things about women's rights at that time is sort of taboo. Nobody wants to touch it. So I said, okay, tell me what you want me to do.
Right.
She told me, and then we mobilized women. That's why I became a women's rights activist. For my story, my beginning, I just thought it was very unfair.
Okay.
You know, so I said, what do we do? So we started mobilizing. We needed to have a national conference on women's rights. We had the conference, then we had a coup. We had a military coup. You know, and the Ministry of the Constitution was suspended. Right. So we couldn't talk about rights. So I then realized if I need to fight for women's rights, I think I need to shift and start fighting for democracy. So I became an activist. You know, and I took women into the streets. I led a campaign to get the military off. So I was the champion in my country and fought the military, fought in the streets, led campaigns, led demonstrations, eventually. And at the same time, we had a war. Yes. While all this was going on. Right. We had a war. So the military decided that we cannot have an election because we need to have the peace process. Right. We came to the conclusion, post-war reconstruction is a lot of money. Money comes into your country, like Rwanda and the others. How can I put those money into the hands of an elected leaders? So we said no. So we said we cannot have. So the campaign was election before peace or peace before election. So I led the campaign of election before peace. So we went into the election. It was a very difficult experience. Yes. And I was targeted so many times, you know. Most of the times I can't sleep in my house. Oh. You know, I have to sleep in different embassies. For your protection. For my protection. Yes. So we had the first democratic election in three decades. Because we had a long years of 27 years of one-party rule. Right. And then we had the military. Yes. In the middle of it, we had the war. So we had elections. It was not the best election, But for us, it was the start.
Yes.
You know, and so after the election, I sat back and then I realized I can't go back to insurance. My life has changed. There's so many things I need to fight for. Women's rights, democracy, good governance, corruption. Corruption was one of the things that led to the war in Sierra Leone.
Right.
Mismanagement of state resources.
Yes.
So I went to my insurance company. I was the number 2. I said to my boss, I said, I don't think I'll be able to come back. Because I took time off to focus on all this demonstration and everything.
The campaigning and everything.
So so I agreed with the board and I set up an organization which became Campaign for Good Governance, became the biggest human rights organization in the country. We're documenting the atrocities of the war. And we're campaigning for democracy. We train ministers, you know, training for the judiciary. This was the war. Most of the judges who had been trained, who were actually sitting at the judiciary, have never done human rights training.
No.
Never. Because these are people in their 50s, in their 40s.
Yes.
I mean, at that time, human rights was just a concept.
Yes.
So because of the war, because of the atrocities that committed during the war, we had to make sure human rights become part and parcel of our laws in Sierra Leone. So there was a lot of changes that had to take place. We had to have anti-corruption commission, so many things. So I decided, no, I don't want to be in insurance.
No more insurance.
I do any. So I ran my NGO.
Okay, so before you go there, there's something tagging at me. Let me just track you back a bit. When you were done with, you know, sending your farewell to your mom, and you said that you walked to this UNDP office, what prompted that? Because you see, you're already in insurance. You could easily have decided to go back to work, you know, normal work, whatever it is you're doing before. But you went, you just, what was that transition and how quick was it?
My mother was my best friend.
Yes.
I was an only child. She was my backbone. She was an inspiration to me. And I have to tell you, I've still not recovered from her death 30 years after she died. Every time I visit her grave in the village, I cry. She was the only person I had. I had no sister. She had an only sister. So she was my life. Losing her and being forced not to do what I think the pain was too much for me. And I just said, my father was not rich. But then when we were together, at least they could manage father and mother. But when he left us, we suffered. We really, really did suffer. It was very difficult. My mother had left the village for a long time. She's been in the city. Then she had to come back to the village. She was doing petty trading. It was tough. And most of the time, she couldn't provide food. And she just kept saying to me, you know, that sometimes we just drink water. You know, so all of that pain I bottle up. And there he comes. At her funeral, you know, he said, you can't bury her. And I met my husband when I was at university. He supported me. He helped me to go to study in the UK. You know, so I built a relation. My mother knows him. I already had a son, my only child. I have one biological child, my son. So I was building up. I had my first car. You know, so I was okay starting, you know, seeing a future in front of you.
Yes.
Then all of a sudden, so the pain and the bitterness of losing my mom and the way he behaved, I just thought something in my brain said, this is not fair. So I spoke to 1 or 2 people and they said, you know, you go to UNDP. It turned out it's a woman, Mrs. Zara Nuru. She's a Tanzanian who was head of UNDP. People said to me, I wanted to understand what was it. Why could he do this to us if there's any fallback? So I went to her for understanding and explanation. Then she sat me down. She educated me. She told me what was the problem in my country, what's the problem with our culture. I said, can I do anything? She said, yes, you can. She said, you know how many women suffer? So that was one thing. I suppose somewhere inside, there's the activism.
Yes, yes.
Which was...
the fire was set up now.
Yes.
At that UNDP office.
Yes.
Yes, something was ignited.
Yes.
And you decided this is now the path that my life is on.
And it's also like a gift to my mom.
Yes.
I just needed to do something for her.
Right.
You know.
Absolutely amazing.